everyone, it's A here. Today I'm going to be starting something that I would consider more of an informational series. A lot of people that I make friends with, or a lot of new content creators that I meet, or just in general, even some old friends of mine, often ask me questions like, what is borderline personality disorder? And it's such a broad subject and just gets very intricate really fast, and there's a lot of, I don't want to say nuance to it, but there's a lot of just information and very specific things with the disorder that I feel like it should get its own video series. So, now that I have your attention, viewer discretion is going to be advised with this. The following series is not for the faint of heart and not intended for downplaying the personality disorder. It's also not for anyone that knows me personally, per se. The purpose of this series is to explain the nature of the disorder, its complexities, and how living life with the disorder can be really complicated. This is for those that want to know how and what it looks like, and for those who may have BPD and want to know more about it, or how they can prevent their own destructive habits and stuff like that. And also for people that might relate to a lot of the symptoms, but don't necessarily have a diagnosis and don't know where to start. I will say that if you are someone who knows me personally, and you have questions for me afterwards, please don't ask me. I don't want to talk about it. If you have questions, leave them down below. I will be going over a lot more things in the future. This is just video one of who knows how many, but for the moment, I don't want to discuss a lot of different things. I would rather you do your own research, actually, because sometimes asking one person with BPD isn't a good testimony, because in reality, with how complex the disorder is, it's different for a lot of people. Sensitive topics will include mentions of self-harm, mentions of depression, anxiety, mentions of suicidal thoughts or ideation, mentions of internal distress, mentions of hospitalization, violence, death, emotional abuse, physical abuse, assault, sexual assault, and poor self-care. This is going to be how it is going to be for the series. These sensitive topics will always be included throughout every video. However, I will say for today's video, due to the fact that this is an overview, a lot of this will not be directly mentioned. So without that out of the way, here we go. What is borderline personality disorder? By the definition of the Mayo Clinic, it is a mental disorder characterized by unstable moods, behavior, and relationships. Borderline personality disorder can be referred to as BPD for short. It is, in simple layman terms, the inability to regulate your own emotions. The more technical way of explaining it, people with BPD typically have a smaller amygdala, which is a gland in your brain that is responsible for emotional regulation and your sort of action response to events that are occurring, such as your fight or flight response. It is smaller in the brain, but that does not mean that it is not as effective. That actually means that it is more drastically responsive. So now, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it, what are some traits of borderline personality disorder? One of the more outlying ones is mirroring, also known as the chameleon effect. This would be unconsciously and unintentionally adopting traits of someone that you spend a lot of time with. And I'll go into more specific examples a bit after this. Another very big trait would be splitting, also known as idolizing and demonizing. This is a cycle of being really happy with someone and then flipping to being really aggressive with them. So like, oh my gosh, like, you're amazing, I love you, to, oh my gosh, I hate you, like, stay away from me, right? Another one would be intense feelings and emotional reactions. It is said that people with BPD feel emotions upwards of 10 times more intensely than someone who doesn't have it. That being just our, like, emotional reactions and how we respond to things is often considered more, like, dramatized and stuff like that, but it's not a conscious decision to react that way, it just comes off that way because that's how it feels for us. Another thing would be a lack of self-identity. due to mirroring and uncertainties with people, which we'll go over other traits of borderline personality disorder a bit further down the line in the video. It leads to a constant struggle of who am I, and like how do I know who I am, and this just kind of goes on as long as the disorder affects the person. So now I'm going to get into some examples so that before we go to the sort of other traits I want to highlight, you can kind of have an idea of how we get to that point, right? So some examples of mirroring or mimicking, these ones are going to be unharmful examples. And a reminder that this is copying behaviors or phrases, but unconsciously, right? So we have me and Simon, right? Everyone knows that publicly on my content that him and I are together. So I'll be like, oh my gosh, Simon, I finished this awesome project. I made this video. Like, isn't this cool? And then he'll be like, oh, let's go. Right? Because, yeah, Simon. And then later, right, you know, now, because I have BPD, I'm gonna unintentionally adopt this trait. And this is, again, an example. So now I'm talking with Adora, and Adora's like, hey, Izzy, I just got to affiliate. And now I'm like, let's go! And then I adopt this phrase in all of my casual conversation now. Someone's gonna tell me, oh, hey, Itzy, like, I did this. And I'm like, let's go! Because now it's something that I've taken into my vocabulary because I've heard him say it so many times and I hang out with him so often. It's something that I unconsciously start mirroring. So now it's a part of me. So now an unhealthy example, we have me and Simon again. Yeah, he's gonna get dragged this whole video, I'm sorry. So Simon starts off with, man, I am so stupid sometimes. Cause, you know, Simon's a little silly. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel that too. And then, because I'm mirroring and I'm like intaking that without realizing, it can turn into like some really unhealthy manifestations, and now it becomes, man, I am really fucking stupid. Just, oh, I hate myself. Why am I so dumb? Why does this keep happening to me? And now, at this point, it's unhealthy mirroring, right? And this is a very simple example, and this is not me trying to belittle BPD, but this is trying to give an example that would make sense to someone that does not have the disorder, right? So this could turn into an episode of spiraling downward because I'm intaking one comment or intaking an emotion, and now it's like draining me. And again, obviously this is a very simple example. Later down the line, I will have a whole separate video dedicated to mirroring and mimicking. So the next example is splitting, or idolizing and demonizing. This would be a long-term pattern of alternating between totally idealizing other people to totally devaluing them or demonizing them. In psychology, this is referred to as splitting. I say idolizing and demonizing because that's how I've always heard it, growing up with my therapist, like, and how she explained it. This is completely unconscious, and I'm gonna have to explain a lot more with the example that I have, but it's the unconscious split or shift in perspective. So I have me, and I have Simon again. Yeah, he's really gonna get dragged. I love you, babe, if you're watching this. So, a great example, right? I love you so much, oh my gosh, you're so amazing, right? And then Simon's like, I love you too. Alright? And then, oh no, the split happens. Let's see. The best kind of example to give with this is, because emotions linger for so long, right? Let's say Simon and I have a little bit of fights like here and there, and there's a little bit of debacles, just going back and forth, debates, whatever you want to call them, arguments. And they get resolved, but just because they've been resolved, like verbally communicated with resolution, does not mean that emotionally, like, I'm not caught up with, like, where we are logically, right? So, because the emotions are still lingering, a lot of stuff like that in quick succession can build up into microaggressions, and then eventually just full on, like, it can get really aggressive. So now we have, I love you so much, oh my gosh, you're so amazing, babe, to, oh my gosh, leave me alone, I'm literally so fucking tired of you, go away, Simon, I don't want to talk to you right now. This is actually a very real example, but this is the truth. This does not just necessarily happen in a relationship setting, but this happens across the board. If there are like a lot of microaggressions, or if there are a lot of people saying the same thing to me, it can turn very aggressive very, very fast if I'm uncomfortable with what's being said, or like me properly communicating of, hey, I'm not comfortable with this isn't taken, or just in general boundaries get crossed, stuff like this. So it can go from things are okay to an immediate flip-flop of, oh my gosh, like I need out because the emotions are just not giving way right now, and like I don't have time to decompress and kind of let go of everything that I'm holding on to emotionally. So here's a very awkward example. So I'm gonna put this out here that there is no real way to kind of gauge this. I can link a video to where there was a psychologist that broke down kind of how he came to this conclusion. But emotional intensity. It is said that people with BPD feel emotions upwards of 10 times more intensely than someone who does not have BPD. So this is going to be the example that I'm using. There is in no real world where this happens. Simon and I are best friends, and we've talked about like different boundaries for our relationship, so this example will never happen, hopefully. It shouldn't. But this is just kind of giving a numerical example so that you kind of have a good picture in your head. But without further ado, if Simon and I broke up, which would not happen, but the emotional reaction would be vastly different. So obviously Simon and I would both be sad. Simon would likely be heartbroken for an extended period. To put a like number on it, for the example, let's say 6 months, right? For me, I would be heartbroken for an extremely long time. For a numerical example, for the sake of the example, let's say upwards of 3 years. The reason that I'm giving these kind of a numerical sense is to explain the fact that even though this is hypothetical, in a real example, and I can attest to this with past relationships that were extremely unhealthy, whereas eventually Simon could move on, let's say even if it wasn't Simon per se, eventually he would go on about his life and he would get over it. With BPD amplifying the emotions for me like grieving the relationship would be more like I'm grieving the loss of a loved one. Like as in if Simon had literally passed away rather than we were just breaking up and the relationship was just, us temporarily separating and, either maybe we later come back as friends or we don't come back as friends. But for me, emotionally, like the emotional burden would be the same as if he had died. So that's maybe not the best example, but that is a very, this is a very easy example to kind of put into layman terms, for me at least. So that's why I bring this one up. Oh, okay. No, I did it wrong. Okay, it's fine, I coded it wrong. Anyway, so a visual example of lack of self-identity. This one's kind of a really hard one to, visualize, but, it'll be here in a second. Due to mirroring and uncertainties with people with BPD, which this will be explained with later traits that I have listed out, but a lot of us struggle with, who are we as a person, right? So obviously this is a visual example, but these are kind of a lot of things that go through my head with just relationships, like with my friends, with my family, with other people that I know, with coworkers, just in general, people across the board. Not necessarily like in a dating sense, but things like, do I not deserve a healthy relationship because BPD is so complicated? Do I like K-pop music, or do I only like it because my friends do? Am I really a kind person, or am I only being nice because I'm afraid of being abandoned? Am I a person, or am I a monster because of BPD? Am I good enough for this job or deserving of this position? Will I be mentally stable enough to keep these friends? Do they really love me for me? Am I capable of keeping a partner? Do I know who I am? They said I'm wrong, or I'm doing this for the wrong reasons. Am I? How do I describe myself? This is the best visual example I can give you. But a lot of just, who am I, is a really hard question to answer. And when people, give me compliments about things, it's really hard for me to ingest that. And some people, on a regular basis just think, oh, I don't deserve these compliments because, I've been through a lot, so I don't deserve positive things towards me. Not only is that not true, if you are a good person, you deserve good things to happen to you. It's just very hard to accept that. And then with BPD, you add on the amplification of, you know, oh my gosh, like, am I really like this? A lot of people that have BPD, when they experience like bad episodes, there are people that will be like, oh my gosh, like, this is the real you, you're a monster, you're horrible. And because we don't have a good sense of self-identity, we will just ingest that as the truth. That's very sad to say, and it's not something amazing to think about, but that's the reality of it. And we do not control how long that sits with us either. So it's not really fun per se, but it's a struggle, and even knowing how that works also doesn't make it any better. Because even if you are self-aware and you know, it still doesn't hurt any less. Not in any capacity. So here are some other traits of borderline personality disorder that I kind of wanted to highlight. I don't have examples for these because these I want to get into more deeper later, and trying to explain them very simply is gonna be a bit hard. I don't want the video to be too long. But fear of abandonment. People with BPD, due to the nature of the disorder, consistently feel like there are people that are going to actively abandon them. So going back to things like mirroring, some people will take it as, oh my gosh, they're copying my whole personality. Or, you know, with idolizing and demonizing, why do they hate me? Like, if they just hate me, like, I'll just leave so that their life is better. Kind of things of that mentality. What people don't understand is we are more afraid of you than you are of us. That might not feel real, it might not feel realistic, but I can, at least for myself, attest to the fact that I live in a constant, perpetual state of being paranoid of people. Anyway, unstable relationships. A lot of people with BPD often make and lose friends or partners extremely fast due to fears of hurting others and being abandoned. Which can lead to this cycle of, you join a new friend group this week and you're like, oh, they're cool. One little fight happens and okay, I want to leave because I don't feel comfortable anymore. You know, are they going to think that I'm a bad person because I had one small breakdown and now like everything's horrible? Which is definitely not always true, but that's kind of the mentality that we default to if we've had a long history of being abandoned by friends or partners. In the case of partners, sometimes people with BPD get into risky relationships where, like, oh, this is a new person that I just met, I'm going to get into a relationship with them, it's going to be amazing, it's going to be an emotional high, and then when the inevitable crash comes because, well, the honeymoon phase is over, and things, you know, you move on, and the relationship, you kind of start to learn more about each other, just the natural stage of progression in a partnership. Now everything's crashing, everything doesn't feel okay, so then they leave the relationship. It's just something that happens, unfortunately. One of the next ones is dissociation from reality, a mental complete disconnection with the basic human necessities, social interaction, as in isolation, and in general just kind of shutting down. Sometimes during long periods of just like being emotionally unstable, it leads to quite literally like mentally checking out of every situation. So you go from having like your highs and then your lows to just this really mellow period where you exist, but you're not really feeling anything. This is considered like the brain's way of just coping with borderline personality disorder because, you know, your body going through really intense mood swings and like you're having a lot of hormonal rushes because of the emotions. It's not healthy on your body either. It does cause a lot of physical distress. So the brain just kind of pulls you back almost, and you're just mellow for a very long period. So that's where that comes from. The final one for today is mental distortion. This is, again, completely unconscious. A lot of things with BPD are really just unconscious, even if you are very self-aware of the disorder and how it functions, how it hurts you, how it makes you do certain things. There is still no controlling when you are emotionally just going through all of like the conflict and just kind of everything inside. It doesn't take that away in reality. But mental distortion is what I've called it, but this is basically where your feelings can kind of distort how you see situations and how you see conflict with other people. This is something that a lot of people struggle with because feelings are not facts, but feelings definitely play a major part into how you respond to situations. Again, going back to having really intense emotions, a lot of things with BPD are kind of fight or flight responses when like the wrong either buttons are pushed, which is not a really good way to word it, but you know, you hit a bad pressure point with someone with BPD and it can become a very messy situation really fast, unfortunately. I can attest to things definitely being blown out of proportion, and then when I come down from like the manic high of like, oh my gosh, like I'm so angry, to then like the present time, it's like, wow, like I really didn't handle that very responsibly. But it's not like I could also really do anything. I don't really remember everything that was going on, and I don't even remember how I was like fully like functioning. A lot of everything that goes on is just we're completely unaware, and it sucks. It definitely does just suck. There's no hiding that. Okay, so now, why are emotions hard to regulate for someone with BPD? All of the previous traits that I've shown you are completely unconscious decisions and actions that someone with BPD ends up doing. So this is kind of talking about what I already talked about, but mirroring, for example, makes it really easy to adopt traits of someone else, say a close friend. If said friend does not talk highly of themselves, you know, that can be something that you adopt. It's kind of just taking everything inward. If you are around, I'll give you a personal example, I guess. I had a friend group back in the day that was just a lot of people that were not taking care of themselves and were all mentally not trying to do better with their mental health. So when you spend a lot of time around people like that, you kind of ingest their mentalities, their actions, their behaviors, how they take care of themselves turns into how you take care of yourself. And it can get very, very unhealthy very fast. And if you're someone that has BPD, but let's say you're not diagnosed and you have no idea that you have it, that can be really horrible. And now, you know, you end up not taking care of yourself, and there's kind of nothing that you can do unless you realize that. And removing yourself from that situation is going to make you feel abandoned, isolated, and it's going to reinforce more of the emotional distress with the disorder. Idolizing and demonizing is difficult to combat when partners and friends dislike giving you space for recuperation. And then because of that, you don't want them to abandon you, so you don't create the boundary of, hey, I need some space right now, and then it can lead to a massive amount of overstimulation. A great example of this, I'm gonna use Simon again, is if him and I are hanging out every single day and there are a lot of microaggressions going on, like with just small situations that are driving me insane, but because emotionally, like, my brain is still not letting go of the situation because there's nothing I can do about it. If I don't take time away from him, there is the risk that things can escalate even further. This isn't just a thing with partners, though. This is a thing kind of with everyone in my life. I have to take almost a decompression period away from anyone that I really kind of get involved with. Some of the downsides to this, though, are friends or partners can get overstrained and either step away or abandon the individual with BPD, which can cause grave emotional distress, which further emphasizes like why BPD is really difficult and why things can get just really intense. If you are someone that has a friend or a partner that has BPD, you definitely do kind of need your own support group, and you also need to be aware of what BPD is, how it's affecting them, and how it's going to emotionally affect you, because there is no human that can just not ingest all of the emotions. As much as, you know, we try to do things like that, it's not possible. That's not how this works. So, you know, you definitely kind of need your own support group, but also understand that the person with BPD is not doing any of this maliciously. A lot of these are very, very much truly unconscious decisions that just kind of happen, and like fixing it per se, or learning to understand and be self-aware of how BPD affects you and the people you love is very, very hard. It's difficult. It's not easy. People with BPD often experience a lot of life-changing actions due to impulsive behaviors that are incurred with mental breakdowns. Going back to earlier, that can be leaving a bunch of friend groups, changing jobs constantly, changing relationships, different things like that. Things that would be considered a staple in your life or like a pillar, things that are like supposed to be something more consistent, can be in BPD just a lot of constant switching and changing up things, and that in and of itself continues to feed into the instability and make things a lot more emotionally chaotic. Something that people have pointed out to me over the time in the course of like knowing people is there's a state of being conscious of your emotional decisions, and then during heavily manic periods you kind of become a different person. In a sense, I'm glad that I have friends that point this out, because it helps me feel less like the disorder is a part of me and more that it just kind of controls me at times. I don't really know if that's the best way of explaining it, but it's more reassuring to think that I'm still seen as my own individual outside of the disorder rather than BPD is what defines me. But the best way to describe it is when there is a period of emotional intensity. You can kind of refer to it as manic almost. Manic would not be the medical term used for someone with BPD. This is usually associated with bipolar disorder, but for the sake of this video and then for the sake of my sanity, because I cannot find the word for the life of me, I'm gonna say manic because they are pretty similar. So that's why I used it here. And then finally, it'd say this was very brief. I thought you said this wouldn't be. I'm gonna apologize because this is the initial video. So video number 1 in a long series that I'm gonna make about borderline personality disorder, trying to educate about it, and just in general, like the day-to-day life and how certain things function, how certain specific scenarios kind of end up, why they happen, what traits affect, that sort of thing. This video, though, was just an overview. That's what it was meant to be. As time goes on, this will be a testimony about my own life and how my destructive behaviors have affected me in the past, in the current present, and how they might in the future. And just in general, kind of covering BPD as a whole. I feel like in a certain capacity, there's not a lot of content about BPD from someone who has it, and just like very, I would say, self-aware explained content. My hope with this project is just to raise awareness about BPD for both people that have it and those who have friends that have it or partners that have it and like want to know more about it but don't know how to approach it. That like watching a psychologist break down a video is like really intense because like now you feel like it's not maybe advice that you can use in like very specific situations and kind of stuff like that. It's also for those that relate to a lot of like symptoms that I have, or like people that watch me and they're like, man, like I really relate to a lot of things that she's going through. Like I think I might have BPD, but I don't really know how to approach it. And stuff like that. In the future, I plan to go over stigmatism with BPD and just stuff like that. All in all, like BPD is referred to as one of the scariest mental health disorders because of the scary statistics that are attached to it. And I feel like the point of this series is just BPD is not a death sentence, even if it feels like it sometimes. So that's gonna be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sorry this wasn't my normal content, but this is something that's very important to me, and I want to hopefully help someone somewhere, because I certainly know when I was younger, I did not have people to help me navigate this disorder, not for a very long time. So that'll be it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!